It's Monday as we record, and we are also getting ambitious with our releases. So it will be Monday as we release. We're glad that you're here. Welcome. Rate, review, and share. This podcast, we've been giving so much of our time and our life to it, and it has been giving back to us, and we are super thankful. There's a lot coming down the pipeline. And if you want to help us grow, if you rate the podcast, if you review it, if you share it, all of those things help us tremendously. So rate, review, and share, please. Wherever you listen, that's super helpful. Today, we are talking a little bit about our Western States coverage that we're putting together. We're talking about the Aravaipa controversy. We've got plenty for you today. It's going to be jam-packed. And before I go any further, Wolfie, welcome. How was your weekend?
Yeah, it's good, man. Just a lot of busy housework. Got a 3-day weekend, so the wife decided to pile up all the things that we've been putting off, and while still trying to fit in some quality miles. So at least it's a holiday today. We can rest, enjoy some nice steaks, grill, dip in the pool, and it's always good to talk with you.
That's right, yeah, and you as well. And America, it's a holiday for you today, Memorial Day. Mm-hmm. So good holiday, good time to be with family, good time to remember. It's a good day.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Western States coverage, we're getting pretty ambitious with it. I mean, for the year, I was really hoping to do my Western States coverage, our Western States coverage, and a big ambitious thing from Western States itself, from the event, and just couldn't pull it together. And so we're doing stuff at Paris Fashion Week in lieu of that, because there's a lot more opportunity, a lot of brands more interested in what I was trying to put together for that. However, we've got sponsors interested. We got things coming together. We got Western States coverage coming. And so, Brian, we've talked a little bit about it offline, but even just to kind of to build in public here, like, what to you would be the perfect version of our Western States coverage? What would make it unique? That it's not just another free trail, because that's already up there. They're doing what they do, and that's a good thing. How do we be our own in this? What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think initially our thought was to try and really, celebrate, some of the stories that are in the 95. If we were going to be boots on ground, be able to be in real life and interact with, crews and, runners on the week of, so as we go virtual, probably still soliciting some of those stories from the 95, bringing those into the fold, whether you're there racing or, somebody that's racing, reach out, we'll see how we can, pull your story into the coverage. It was also kind of trying to create and, build out different storylines, kind of like I experimented with Cocodona's, Max Fin rivalry. We got a couple ideas we're going to launch into today with, regards to made men versus associates, we're calling it. So that'll be a nice, fun piece to track as well. And then, I think just being over in Paris this year gives a new kind of twist on it to try and blend two worlds that nobody's ever attempted to do or thought that they probably could ever, coexist. Right. So we're talking about from the catwalks to the high school track, in Placer. So it's like, can we do it? I think we'll land on some coverage that's unique and fun.
Yeah. And so probably warrants an explanation for the greater world out there who loves running. Paris Fashion Week is very much becoming, a running event where a lot of the brands come out, but it's more of like the self-expression brands that from Satisfy, Portal. Currently running won't be here, but they certainly belong in that lane. And so, they're here, they're doing a lot of stuff together. It's like a buying time. You're selling, you're trying to sell into retail, this sort of stuff. So it's people are meeting. SOAR's going to be here, all the great names of this movement. And so we're going to do some coverage of that. I thought, man, my heart is still in Western States. And so we're going to set up a little studio here in Paris. So it's going to be Paris meets Mesa. And we're going to Mesa.
Yeah. You got it. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I thought I just questioned myself and start to pull on some of these threads the way that I think we can, if the big players out there are ESPN, in the old days when Fox News, when Fox Sports came along and started covering, and it felt a little bit counter, it felt a little bit different. It felt a little bit more and one to the NBA, all of those sort of analogies is how I see it coming together. But I love what you're saying. I want to cover some of the 95, your dream always of having some sort of like crew cam or getting in with the crews. So anyone running it, I'd love to hear from them. So we could, get them on the phone during coverage or do some phone interviews leading up to it and have it plugged in. We'll do some sort of pre-race thing, some sort of in-race stuff, like every hour on the hour for 10, 15 minutes, and all that's coming soon. But to me, what I'm honestly most excited about genuinely is the way that you're looking at framing it. Because I think that, to me, from a global scale, is the most interesting way to look at this race. It's the best field that we've seen in I don't know how long, if maybe ever. And to you, there's two distinct categories of where you would place in the men's race the top of the field. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, using kind of the whole like mafia play on words, right? You've got made men, right? Like they've already made their bones.
Yeah.
They've showed up at the biggest races. They've thrown down performances or, history's greatest course records, and they've done it, either multiple times at the same race or, at the biggest stages across the world. They've got brand and name recognition, and as far as, economic and livelihood goes, I think, they all are supporting themselves or can support themselves just based on their performance abilities alone. And then you've got the associates, and it gets a little bit muddy there, right? I think we're going to have fun to see who landed, where within our lists. It would be fun to
Yeah.
hear where listeners, agree, disagree. And so, yeah, the associates are those still coming up, right? Associates are looking to still make their bones. Maybe they're one top 5 away at Western States or a victory away from, solidifying a contract, putting their name in the lexicon of the 95. And that's
Yeah.
where we're going to go with this.
Okay. I mean, so for me, the instant first question that I think the hardest of all, like first, I should say for me, in the way that I think, like the underdog, lifelong Texas Tech fan, they've never been the favorite. I love the underdog. I love the one who destroys the story, the upset. I love that stuff. So anyone who ends up in that category, to me, that I'm complimenting you. That's an homage. Like you have potential to be the disruptor. But where does David Roach fit in your mind? Is he made man or is he an associate?
I put him in the made man.
Yo,
Yeah. And again, I think it's, it's maybe controversial, something that you could throw
yeah,
around and debate a little bit, but everybody knows David Roach. So again, that's kind of this own, proprietary algorithm that we're each using here, right? Like how heavily do you weight name recognition, right? I mean, I think what he's done in the
oh,
last maybe 24 months has lifted
yeah,
him up, from where he was prior as just being a swap coach and, 50K and shorter athlete. We know he's got the talent to just be a pure runner. And so what he's done with Leadville and Javelina, I put him in the made men.
yeah. I mean, what's a swap coach? What's swap?
Oh, that's the name of his coaching program with him and his wife.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I
Some
thought. I
more
mean, the
called
first
coach.
time I
Yeah.
I ever heard his name was people throwing shade on it on him, and so other coaches. I don't know what it is. Do you know why he's kind of been? I don't want to say loved or hated, but people have had mixed reviews on him publicly.
I think he just wasn't easy to maybe put in a box, in
Mm,
a sense, because he is this highly capable, talented runner. And I think he was so
uh,
self-deprecating that it came off as insincere at times. I think
mm,
everything was always love and kindness, radical acceptance and some of these things that like just in the volume that he would do it was probably just so unnatural to people. Like, he's a unique
yeah,
character in that way. His coaching, I don't know enough about it. I think just from the outside, he's, somebody that he has a huge, they both have huge volume of clients within the swap ecosystem.
okay,
But they have a ton of professionals that have done well at the biggest races. So I just know it was like the Roach versus Coop, kind of rivalry. There were
that's where I heard the shade
yeah, there was
was
two
Coop.
camps there, right? Two ideologies about coaching, high volume versus, a slower build, right? Low mileage. And I don't know. Yeah. Who knows where it really got off the rails with it. But I think it was just
Yeah.
kind of that whole kindness and leading with awesomeness. It just, yeah, some of the things that he would say, I think just landed as foreign to people.
Do you think his success as a performer, as a runner, athlete, putting on these great performances, speaks to his coaching philosophy? I mean, is that like, do you think this is an extension and expression of how he thinks, and now he's able to like be his own case study, of one out in the field dominating with his philosophy compared to Coops?
Yeah, well, his wife coaches him, so for whatever that
Okay,
means, right? They probably collaborate a bit on what the coaching, what the
sure.
what the week's going to look like or the block, right? But yeah, I mean,
Uh-huh.
I think it probably he's had a ton of athletes that have come through his program and well coached by him, done extremely well. I think they were on a heater there with like having a bunch of Western States champions or top 10 finishers and so, yeah, I just think when you have other professionals that are relying on you for coaching and, they are, performing well at the biggest races, then it validates that you've got some credibility there.
Yeah. All right. Any other notable associates? And again, the associates thing, we have made men, a mafia term. You're the one, you're in, you're established, you're not going anywhere. And then the associates are the ones who someday hope to be made men, and they're doing the same dirty work that the made men are doing, more or less. Anyone else that's doing the same dirty work but hasn't been made yet in there, like a Hans Troyer or something like that?
Yeah, so Hans is obviously leading the list of, associates. And I think he's young, and so, both in age and in experience here. And so he's had obviously some injuries, some different setbacks that have taken him off the starting list in his short career. When he has showed up, he's raced himself into emergency rooms. So, he's obviously a fascinating character that everybody's probably pulling for to show up and have his biggest day on the biggest stage. And, I think he's got definitely top 10, potential, and depending on
Yeah.
how the race goes out, I could easily see him within the top 5.
Yeah. And then
Others
a
that are a bit
notable,
more maybe controversial. I have Rod Farvard, so last year's second place male in the associates. Again, I just
oh,
think when you think about again the algorithm being kind of name recognition, I don't know what his contract looks like, but he's bounced around a little bit. I think he was North Face and then most recently got Hoka after last year's, but I think
mm,
he's still one quality performance, one, major victory away from really being a made man. Even put Seth Ruling in there as an associate. Again, you've got to kind of like separate where your nostalgia for Seth because he's on Boulder Boys podcast. You get to listen to him all the time. You want him to be a made man. But again, I just think he's maybe another one like Rod, where he's, one victory away at the ultra distance, at this distance,
hmm.
being, moved into that category.
I just wonder what it's like for an associate to line up next to a Jim Walmsley, and simply because I just think about like, is this, as a competitor, as you would know better than me, or in that moment, like you're at the starting line and you're thinking, especially 100 miles, are you at that starting line thinking this is my chance? Like, I mean, what would go through the head of someone like, okay, this is the race, I get this win, this is the marquee win I need, and it's going to launch me. I'm going to be a made man if I get this. Like what goes through the head at the starting line even?
Well, I think for me, as long as you've proven to yourself that you can do it once, it doesn't
Mm,
matter that you're not Walmsley, who's done it, half a dozen to a dozen times. You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah,
to me that's the thing that like kind of separates, greatness, and legendary status from, those with the same amount of talent, but mentally or preparation wise, they can't show up on race day with the same goods, right? And so
yeah,
if you're one of these associates, I think they all have the confidence in knowing they can train, and put up the numbers just as the best can. They've put up race results, at least once or twice before that are as good
yeah,
as these others that are in the made man category. And so they just have to have this radical confidence that, 2025 Western States is their day.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so when you look at the made men versus the associates, and then framing in like extended coverage of the 95, first, give me the elevator version. Define the 95.
Yeah, 95 is just those that, aren't looking at using running and your results to solidify your career, your livelihood, right? Like running isn't, and I know some of these that are in the made men and even the associates, they have day jobs, right? They choose to still, have a 9 to 5 in some capacity, right? A lot of them are in the medical
Yeah.
field, which is a grueling, profession to be in, constantly on your feet, probably a lot of stress, a lot of taking care of others, right? Emotionally, physically. So that's kind of what the 95 is, right? Like you've got a lot of outside responsibilities like you and I, where you fit time for running. You have to make sacrifices to get running into your schedule, whereas others, running is what their time is filled with.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So then within that, like what would be a fun story? Not, you have to, I'm not saying like a specific one, but like, what are you looking for in stories that we could pull out for Western States in that bucket?
Yeah, I think it would be fascinating to follow people that are in that 95 who are looking for a silver buckle. I haven't yet seen anything from Western States or anything, and it's probably a heavy lift. It's difficult. But like
Yeah.
if you're in the 95 and you've got aspirations and talent and you've been able to make those sacrifices to get your training there and you are shooting for sub 24 at Western States,
Yeah.
I mean that's not a lot of people. So now we're talking about kind of a small group at the top end of the 95 that doesn't get nearly as much attention as those who are chasing the last half hour in golden hour. That's
Yeah.
that's what the sport does best, is that it highlights the top 10 and then it highlights the back end, right? The last hour. I would say those are your two ends of the spectrum of what our sport really does well. And in between, there's a lot of other fascinating stories I think that could be highlighted as well that the 95 would love to hear. They just haven't been exposed to it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. The first Bad Runners take I ever did before you and I started doing them together was on Golden Hour, and how, as someone who has been in Golden Hour before, I don't like it. It doesn't like, it's all of the fast people. It's like when you get passed by someone who speeds past you and they tell you good job. I just always think, I'm not saying you don't mean it, but I'm not doing a good job. You're doing a good job. You sped past me. So when all these faster people coming out and celebrating me as I'm, coming in last place, it doesn't, I didn't like it. I know most people do, but as someone who's almost lived it, second to DFL once, I don't like it.
Well, here's a little secret. When I'm doing that, it's
Uh huh.
50% chance I'm doing it more for me than for you.
Ah,
Because when
okay.
I say good job to you, it takes me out of my pain, out of my struggle. Like if
Okay.
now look, I'm not saying I don't sincerely mean it, but at least 50% of the reason why I'm
Sure.
saying it is because it's going to be a performance enhancer on me.
Oh,
Just for that
I like that.
10 seconds of like, hey man, good job. And then, it kind of just gives me a euphoria
Gives you
to
something.
celebrate somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. But you're right. I've always, so then what I've always said is that I feel like that third quarter, the third quartile is the one that's the least appreciated. So bottom 25%, like, wow, great. I can't believe you're still going. Like, this guy I used to work for, he's an older guy. He was a speedy marathoner. He had like a 240 marathon. And I had just run one in 430. And he was like, I just can't, like, we were in a big group and he was trying to pay a compliment. He's like, I think it's harder what you do because you have to be out there so long. And I was like, well, thanks. I don't want to be out there though. I think he genuinely meant it as a compliment, but in an ultra that 50% and 75%, I think those stories, those are underappreciated. But I like what you're saying, because there's this Venn diagram of the elite athlete who's trying to become a made man and the day job. And if you overlap those, that could be someone going for the sub 24. So they're not going to get sponsored at 23
No.
hours. They're not going to be in the discussion, but they're working based on their ability. They're working as hard as the person going for 15 hours, 14 hours now, whatever the winning time will be. So they're putting in the same work, but they're not, but they also have the day job.
Right. And I think they do have amateur elite talent. I think,
Mm.
you know, there's people who finish in the 29th hour who put in just as much time as somebody who finishes sub 24 from the 95.
Yeah.
And I just think that there are differences in natural talents and abilities.
Yes.
And we should celebrate the sub 24 just as hard as we celebrate the 29:50.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I love the idea. So anyone listening out there who's running it or knows anybody that feels like they're going to be in that middle, I mean, to just be running it, they're going to be thrilled. But if we could also throw some coverage on top of that, nice icing on the cake for them and for the audience to see, hear some of those, the better job with some of those stories.
Yeah, and I think our job is just to like pop in on these live broadcast and
Yeah.
give our give our takes on what's going on in the race, what we like, what we don't like. I don't think it's that we're here to, take over the live coverage by any means. We're just there to complement it
Right.
and provide,
Yes.
our audience, the audience, just contrarian takes, things that maybe the live stream didn't pick up on. There's a lot to miss in in an 18-hour, 30-hour coverage. And there's plenty of
Yeah.
room for somebody like us to come in and, bring our takes and our opinions and bring our polish to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I love it. I'm stoked on that. The trail media zeitgeist is coming.
There we go.
All right. Okay. Aravipa turning corners here. They had a weekend.
Yeah.
Why don't you hit the high level on explaining it? And I've got a few thoughts, but why don't you jump on it?
Yeah, so as I understand it, it basically was brought to public light by Scott Trayer. He made a post, just kind of outlining some events that took place, with Ferdinand, one of the Aravaipa elite team runners, first starting at Black Canyon. Essentially, it boiled down to, him taking a wrong turn, getting off course for a short period of time, I think around a quarter of a mile or so. I think the total distance that he covered was close to the same that he would have if he stayed on course, but he was off course for somewhere around a quarter of a mile. And instead of, backtracking to his last point of being on course, he just carried on. There was also instances, I think, with, uh, illegal crewing attempts. He missed a bottle at one aid station. The crew was, trying to coordinate to get him a bottle at the next aid station. It wasn't an allowed crewable aid station. And I think this is where Scott got, visual evidence or, encountered the violation. He saw the crew trying to come in course and drop a bottle for him. And anyway, so in response to Scott Trayer's post, Aravipa came out and publicly, gave their statement. There's a long article giving Aravipa's side of the story of the events that occurred. And from there, basically, the comment section lit up with, everybody's opinion on the situation now that we're, ending May and finally getting a public press release of what happened at a golden ticket race with somebody that was racing within the top 10. So there's some, serious implications here about what golden ticket races are, how they're officiated. I think what the community wants to see from Aravipa moving forward, and then everything in between, from people celebrating the decision from Aravipa, going out and I think replying to everyone in the comment section, with a dissenting or constructive take. And yeah, it's really, I think, highlighted the divide that's just right under the surface within our community.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, when did that post from Aravipa go live where they went
What was it, Saturday maybe? I'm not Friday, Saturday,
was it
Sun.
Friday night?
Yeah.
I think they posted it on a Friday
Yeah,
night.
yeah. Friday, yeah.
Nobody posts things on Friday night unless you don't want it to be seen as much. So it got all the faithfuls, in. I mean, for me, from a PR standpoint, you see they were strategically dropping. You drop news, in politics, you drop it Friday afternoon before the Super Bowl. Not that we had a big event this weekend, but you don't, you got to get it out there. You have to the CYA of getting it out there. And then they say they want to hear feedback, but only feedback that I saw Aravipa commenting on was the stuff that complimented Aravipa. So if someone said, Aravipa, you've done a great job, really appreciate you, they would say thank you. But if someone like yourself offered a critique, there wasn't as much enthusiasm. On my end, it's like you said, February, and then saying something in May. I just don't even understand. I just don't understand, like, why now? So this other guy says something, and then they feel like now they're going to look like they're on the high road and taking good care of this. And I don't know. It felt weird to me.
Yeah. Well, I think their hand was forced, right? I think it was a true reaction to, what Scott Trayer's post, was, basically insinuating or, placing judgment on Aravipa. And so Aravipa, because Scott's post, had such high traction, had to, I think, issue their own response to it. So
got to do something.
Again, I think a lot of people on Scott's original post, you've got you got people that you know their names posting on there, and they're
Yeah.
thankful to Scott for the transparency and bringing this to light. There's difficult situations, difficult discussions, right? I think everybody kind of just respects his boldness to to go forward with this information and allow this to be adjudicated out kind of in the public to figure out
Yeah.
was the response right? Where did they get it right? Where did they get it wrong? Which is, I mean, that's what we celebrate here. Like, I don't know why
Yeah.
anybody would be critical of Scott, you know, in doing this. It also requires, or it also, we should mention Canyons, was a race that this same runner, was uh, allegedly guilty of some other violations that UTMB, I guess, researched and determined that there wasn't anything there that they could
Oh,
move
okay.
on. But this Ferdinand
Okay.
guy won the Canyons 100 miler, and so
Yeah.
just the fact that still controversy around his name at another race, where there's smoke, there's fire. I don't know. It's just it makes it more difficult to give the guy a blind,
A
assumption that
blind
he didn't
pass.
do it. Yeah,
Now, I did go read. Was it you say Scott Trayer?
yeah.
I went and read all of his stuff, and I guess maybe I'm just not remembering. Why is he just now saying something about this 3 months
Oh, because
later?
well, he was the athlete at Black Canyon
That witnessed it.
that witnessed the illegal crewing.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Got
I don't know if he also witnessed like the course deviation or if that just came into the conversation afterwards, but
it.
yeah, he
Okay.
definitely witnessed the attempt to hand off a bottle. And the sport's
Yeah.
seen this before, you know what I mean? Like there's been, commenters who have, expressed the same uh, the same type of like having to make these difficult decisions as RDs. Tim Tollefson was in the comments talking about how he had to make a difficult DQ decision, for a
Yeah.
close friend at one of his races at Hard Rock. Xavier, the champion of the race, was later
Oh yeah.
disqualified because he received a water bottle outside of a crewable aid station. Jamil was part of that decision. I think he either witnessed it or heard about it, or he was involved in the mix somehow. And so he's been a part of races that have had to make difficult decisions because they had to adhere to the rules. And I think that's where the community really has a thorn in their side with this decision. The rule book
Mm-hmm.
is extraordinarily crystal clear, right? It's a very
Yeah.
binary delivery of punishment, right, or penalty if you go outside of the course, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so in this case, the rule book didn't allow for any nuance. It didn't allow for any objectivity, right? And
Mm.
Aravipa did that in this case. And I think that's where everybody's kind of taking issue with it. Because let's be honest, like this was a major race. This was a golden ticket race with big implications. Just because he finished 10th place doesn't mean that you bend the rules, right? Like
Right.
if what Aravipa did couldn't have been done at any other place in the race, like if he finished second and the 20-minute time penalty would have still awarded him a golden ticket, I don't think they would have done this. And so you're just
Mm.
providing a solution, to a violation that you're saying that it's okay because it had no impact on anybody else. I don't like that.
Right. And I know you're going to go into depth on this because there's really a lot more to this. I think we're hitting the the top half of it here. But in the comment that got a lot of engagement on that, you posted something about the 95 being attacked or something like that by a ruling like this. Um, can you maybe say the comment better than I am because I'm not quite saying it, and then help me understand what you meant by that?
Yeah, no. So the 95 was in reference to this particular individual that was, commenting heavily within the comment section early on, right? So as soon as
Oh,
the
that's what
post,
you meant by attacked. Okay.
yeah, as soon as the post went live, I mean, very live, you can go in and read the comment thread. We're not looking out here to make any, public shaming on anybody, right?
Yes, now I
Yeah,
understand what you meant by it.
yeah,
You weren't saying that the ruling by
no,
Aravaipa was an attack on
no,
95. It was the way that certain people were responding to innocent comments of the feedback that
yeah,
Aravaipa called for. They were responding, and then there were individuals who were just going after them. That's who you were saying 95 was being attacked. Now I get it.
right, right. And they've been invited to come talk, on a podcast where I think, you know, getting behind a video, talking with words rather than typing in a comment section. I don't think any progress has ever been made of, radical reconciliation in a comment section. And,
Right.
I just,
Right.
when you see this comment section lighting up like that, it's saying, hey, there's something here underneath the actual situation, right? Nobody
Yeah.
nobody is this fired up because it happened to Ferdinand, right? Like
That's
it's not
exactly
the
right.
runner, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not the runner. The runner's getting dragged right now because of lack of proactive transparency from Aravipa. Now I feel bad
Yeah.
for the runner because Aravipa could have just done things differently and avoided all of this, but
Yes.
anyways, yeah, I mean, I think having a conversation about this with people that have an opinion that Aravipa was in the right, or that the community who's making respectful and constructive criticisms are in the wrong, I would just love to talk to that person with that mindset,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
the sport does have a divide, and these type of situations pop up and you can see it, you feel it, and it's just kind of, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's gross.
Yeah. There's a marriage principle that, early on in my marriage, someone taught us and it's that if the reaction is bigger than the situation, then the situation is not the problem. So like if those reactions, like you're saying, those reactions were so big to this guy, Ferdinand, who none of us had heard of. I mean, none of, outside of like a core following knew that name. And it warranted that much like energy as a
Right.
response. You're right. There's something more bubbling beneath the surface within the trail running community, and that was just like an excuse to go at it.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. Because I think, yeah, I mean, we just have to figure it out more. Wolfie's World will be a good place for me to get more in depth in this, have a little bit more runway to talk about it. But like, discipline is love, and I think everybody that's celebrating Aravipa's decision because it's love, kindness, and,
Yeah.
welcoming at its greatest, I think they get it wrong. I think if you deliver discipline because you want to correct behavior, if you want to be, just in, how you apply your rules, I think that's a situation that we could have celebrated,
Yeah.
and I think if you're on Aravipa team, like you have to take your position as a premier race organization for the professionals and the 95 very seriously, right? Like review your rule book. If you want the nuance to make decisions based on, arbitrary decisions, to where you can kind of, apply them based on the severity and the intent of the violation, then put that in your rule book. Review your rule
Yeah.
book with some intentionality. Also understand that, yeah, these individuals, top 10 at Black Canyon, it means something, right? And so
Yeah.
you've got to have race officials potentially at aid stations. You can't rely on fellow runners exclusively, or people out there working the drones or aid station volunteers as kind of like, hey, this happened and now let's go try, after the fact to gather statements from aid station
Mm.
captains and on course media. Like that's not okay. Like, so
Yeah.
again, just real disappointing when you see that Aravipa didn't get out ahead of it and say, in February, this happened. Here's the actions we've taken. We, we stood by the rules, but we will be looking to review the rules because we feel in this case, the penalty was too harsh. Everybody would have celebrated that, and it would have been something to step, to move the sport forward as a serious, competition.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and more news from the weekend, because you had already had like, hey, we call them internally and sometimes externally. Internally, Wolfie 911, the things that like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, this is important. I normally release on Tuesday. There's something I want to say. Let's get it out. 911, and so you had already released a 911, and then this happened, or you had already recorded it. We hadn't released it yet because I woke up Saturday morning in France, and you had just sent it over, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna start getting this ready. But then I see this post from you that's like, hey, check out the comment section here, and I'm like, oh, well, that's also kind of a 911 thing, but we're doing this other 911 thing. So you wanted to just call out and acknowledge Hayden Hawks withdrawing from Western States. Had some great takes, within that podcast. And then also, there's some follow up here that we could look into today that was on your mind. But at high level, Hayden Hawks is is out. He was fixing an issue on his knee. He's been responsive. I think he's, I echo everything you said in that podcast of just being one of the greats. The closest thing we've got to a Prefontaine and Trail. He's hungry. He's a competitor. The hot take that you said that I loved the most was that, did he sacrifice Western States to go to UTMB where there's the prize money? Sacrifice no prize money for prize money? Maybe. I don't know, but I like that take. What else is on your mind with that?
Yeah, so it just got me thinking about like how the fact is that he's going to have to now, race his way back into Western States in 2026. And, Western States has made,
Yeah.
Progress, to have a paternity rollover, right? I think if you're female and you get pregnant, like you're able to roll over your entry for, I don't know how many years it is, but I know they have a program carved out. A lot of the major races are doing so to, accommodate motherhood. And I think for both men and women, I think there should also be like a 1 year window for medical emergencies and procedures. I think they could be reviewed to determine, that it was a surgery or an injury or something that, it wasn't voluntarily, right? Like it wasn't something that like they've just decided not to run Western States, right? Like it's you apply for it and then you can get a 1 year rollover where you can still carry over your golden ticket, or if you're a previous year's top 10 finisher. I mean, this is like an injury that happens on the job, right? Like their training is basically their workplace. Yeah. And so if you get an on the job injury, I think you should still have some protection against your place in the field next year. What do you think?
Yeah. So I went back and I tried, and I looked through Western State's website, because we do get people who listen simply to try and find things that we got wrong, I think.
Right.
It's like, and so I wanted to see like, okay, is there anything before we go into this today? And I found the pregnancy policy, and, you verify that you're pregnant from a doctor or whatever. And there also are scenarios where they could follow up. And I like that policy a lot in a sport that we're saying, hey, let's make sure that, that this is a place for women. There's unique, things that a woman would go through, and that having a child, and we want to make space for that. And if you go through that, you are welcome back here next year. But because our premier American 100-mile race is so hard to get into, even for the people that we desperately want to be in there so we can watch and talk about them, I completely agree that, what I don't know. So did Hayden Hawks go from, 94% to that knee being 100%? Like, would that be considered elective out? Would he have been fine? I don't know how you go about objectively defining what are the things that you're going to allow for them to do in order to not run this year and make space for next year. But it seems like having some sort of procedure of that scale, as a fan, man, I want to see him in the race next year. And I hate the idea of him having to go run a golden ticket race to do it. It just feels like, hasn't he earned his right to, I mean, there's plenty of runners I would say this about as well, but we're just talking about Hayden. Hasn't he earned being in it next year without having to go jump in a golden ticket?
Yeah, I mean, that's my case. I think anybody that's acquired a position like that within Western States has earned the right to roll over in the event that they got to pull out due to injury, right? And I don't think we have to, it doesn't even have to be so hard. Like think about it. If you're Hayden or anybody else that has golden ticket or a bib already for Western States, not from the lottery, if you're going to pull out of that race, I trust that it's legit. Like you're not just like, what's to be gained from pulling out? Like you have to be seriously injured to the point that you can't go to Western States and compete as a professional. Like could Hayden have went and competed as a top 20, as a sub 24 hour guy? Probably, right? But like that's not what his goal is there. And so if anybody's going to pull out of Western States due to injury, I believe it. It's a big enough impact that they don't feel they can get through that race without further hurting themselves. One, and second, they can't get through the race, with the competitive field that they're trying to compete against on that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's an interesting thing to contemplate. I went on a run with my friend Billy White from Sweden, who's in town this weekend, and we were just talking about how unique Sweden is. Billy's from York, which is up in England, but has lived in Sweden for I don't know how long now, decade or more. Puts on the Sörmlands 100. He was saying, for it's mandated that, men get 9 months off when they have a kid.
Wow.
There's this culture. And so even just observationally, like the average everybody, everyday Joe gets that. For Western states, you'd think Hayden Hawks could get it, just Hayden,
Right.
Hayden and like the other previous years, 10, I don't know. It's a hard thing to define exactly who gets it all, but it just seems like to build the framework that there is no framework for that shows that Western states is all the stuff that we've beat the dead horse on of they would like to be more like Hard Rock. They don't want the responsibility. It feels like of being the premier 100-mile ultra for the elites, all that sort of stuff. Just not having a policy on that feels like that to me.
Right. Yeah. So that was one, just with regards to like, having a 12-month rollover for injuries where you have to withdraw. Secondarily, I think this one's even a bigger no-brainer and an easier one to execute. So when Hayden gets pulled off of when he gets, withdrawn from the entrance list and somebody gets pulled off next up from the wait list. And, it just so happens to be, I think that Dan Green would be the next guy up. And so it actually coincidentally does exactly
serves
what
the
I
race.
want it to do, which is that
yes,
we should retain the depth of the field no matter what. So if people have to withdraw or decide not to race, they are replaced with a fellow elite. It's again, this is Western States.
Yeah.
It's the biggest 100 miler. We should not see the field dilute in depth because somebody has to withdraw due to injury. And so they'll have to figure that out. Maybe they have an elite field with everybody who finished in the top 5 and didn't get a golden ticket, and that's the lottery that they pull from. Maybe it goes by some kind of ranking system. I don't know what it is, but I want to see when an elite withdraws from Western States replaced by another elite.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if Dan is officially, I know last I saw that he was the next one coming in. And so you're right. This year's Western States cannot be denied. That's what that feels like to me. It's like you lose Hayden, but you get Dan, obviously super speedy at the 200 plus. What could that be like? Well, could this competition, I also don't know, what it takes to heal from a 250 miler and it being this soon after, 6 weeks after, 8 weeks after. But it feels like this year cannot be denied and that we're in for a treat. So if Dan's in and Hayden's out, man, I'd rather be Dan and Hayden, but what a great field that becomes.
Yeah, totally. Because then you get to see like the whole like Dan Harry rivalry, Harry Sabrotis.
Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, Harry Sabrotis from.
He's 200. Okay, he's in Western States.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Got it. Oh, that's fun. So a 200-mile specialist. I love that already. Yes, 200-mile specialists going head to head in a 100-miler.
Well, yeah, you could even throw String Bean in, Joe McConaughey. He's also
yes,
and so I mean
that's a fun race within a race.
Yeah,
I love it.
He's coming in without the scar tissue of just running Cocodona. He raced his way into Black Canyons, but yeah, again, it's those 3 guys are beloved within the 200-mile community now. So that would be fun.
Consider that done. That is going to be in our coverage. So we're going to be following those 3 closely.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so good.
Yeah. What else is going on?
Gosh. I'm looking at my own racing right now, trying to think about what I'm going to Salt Lake City this weekend to put on the race. Super stoked on that. Going to meet Taylor Spike for the first time. Stoked to see him there. But then I'm coming back and thinking, okay, next Monday when I come back.
What's that? Don't you have a couple elites jumping in too?
I did. We had some jump in. We had Caleb Olson and Ryan Montgomery and Adam Loomis. So Adam Loomis may be lesser known than Caleb and Ryan, but Adam's a racer. He's a fast runner. And he saw those 2 jump in, and then he emailed and said, hey, I saw, essentially like, hey, I want to get in and race. And he didn't want to just get in and run. He wanted to get in and race. And so we got him in. So it's an honor. Like, Ryan lives in Park City. I know he goes to, I believe he's in grad school in Dartmouth. And Caleb, last I knew, was living in Draper, which is about 30 miles, 20 miles south of Salt Lake City.
And this is a 50K?
50K.
And so what's the profile of the gain?
Yeah, 6,700 feet of gain.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a good, it's
Non-technical.
sneaky. It's like high desert, but mountainous. So there's not one tree to stand under, but there's good climbs. Everything's exposed. It's going to be, right now we're saying it's going to be 85 degrees. So, so Jesse Rich was our current course record holder. And I reached out to him because, Jesse coaches some of the top runners in the world with nutrition. And I was like, hey, help me think about our aid stations now. Like, we were going to have them set up at this time and this time based off of all the runners who signed up. But with these guys coming in last minute, like what should we expect? So it actually changed. This is a really interesting case study for race directors in general. When you're building out your logistics, it changed for us when we have to have everyone set up. But thankfully, Jesse Rich is a aid station captain at the furthest one out. So he's advised us and helped us make some changes. And now he has to be set up and ready for them. But, you're putting on a fun race. We've got people coming from, 10, 12 states coming to run the race. And so we're taking it very seriously. But then all of a sudden, some people doing, Ryan and Caleb, they're getting ready for Western States. And so they're using this as a final, I don't know what you even call it. Is it a tune-up or is it just a check-in?
Right.
1 month out.
It's a nice supported long run. That's kind of what I look at.
Right.
Something like this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, man, I'm stoked that these two runners even knew who I was to reach out to me and ask. I was just pumped to see it happen. And so then we're going to, along with, close 280, 290 other runners, will be running through the foothills.
So what was Jesse's current, or what is Jesse's current course record?
357.
Okay. And we think
is that right?
Going to go like 315, 320.
Yeah. So Jesse said, be prepared because it's going to be hot, but he said, and it just depends on how hard they go, but 330. So plan your aid stations according to 330.
Jesse's got tanked. I didn't know he had 357 in those legs, man.
He's fast.
Everybody better listen to those nutrition tips now.
I know. Well, that's what I was talking about. It's like, hey man, you get those good results, but your day job is nutrition and coaching. It's like that's a great way to get clients. I mean, it's probably what works for David Roach and all that, but
right.
Jesse is speedy. He's got second place at the Bear 100 he set a course record in second place. It's just, M1 was flying that day, so he didn't get the full record. But
yeah, that's going to be fun.
I think I'm right on that.
I think you have to omit those three gentlemen from any of the fun inter-race competitions. Like, nobody from the 95 likes when these elites jump in last minute. They sweep the podium and they win the Michael Bolton mile.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that anybody who thought they were going to win the race, you may not win the race now, but you can still get the Michael Bolton final mile, and you get prizes, and there's a podium for you the next day. And then we also have a most improved. This was one way to try and honor the work of the 95 and our consistent customers who run with us, year after year, is if say you ran it year 1 or year 2, the 50K, and you're going to run it this year, whoever improves their time the most as a percentage, we have a first, second, and third place for them as well.
Right.
So trying to get creative with honoring someone's hard work. Like I could get first place on that podium if I improved enough. And that to me is actually quite motivating. That would be really fun for me to go out and, beat my previous record on that course.
And see, this is the exact example of why I want the Outrider League to be successful, is that you could protect the 95 against these elites that can come in last minute and then basically sweep the podium, which, I mean, that's great, right? Like, they're there and they're extremely talented. And I don't want to get some sort of arbitrary fake podium that says you won because we didn't count the professional. That's too gimmicky. But if you have an Outrider League, then you can show up to a race and have a race within a race. So you could use Salt Lake 50K as the Outrider Championship. And so then you have the Outrider Podium, and that's only for people that are part of the Outrider League. So it's a true authentic podium for those in the 95 that want to compete against each other. And it insulates and protects us from, having to get, demolished and smoked by these professional athletes.
Man, that is so funny how you and I end up thinking similarly. we had a thing years ago. It was always just a joke on our way to run a race with some friends in Moab, is that we would start to, of all of our friends, we would have the race within a race, and we would have an awards ceremony and try and make our awards ceremony at the finish line, but be bigger than the race's award ceremony. So it's like, one year I ran it and Hayden Hawks ran it that year. It was his breakout year, and he crushes the 55K course record. Well, I think I got it in 6.5 hours. And my friend Joey got it in like 6:15. So we thought, hey, this would be amazing for us to do our own award ceremony over here, but try and make it bigger and better. But that race within a race does take it to the next level, because it's competitive, but you're not as talented. It gives you something. I love that.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
So the Outrider League, since you mentioned it, that's our running league that we've been concepting. It felt pretty novel. And then I started to hear about some from Inky Steve and others that they have these really cool running leagues, what we call like a beer league, or, like a softball league kind of thing in America. And he takes it very seriously. And so it made me excited about what we're concepting. We have some models to look at, but coming this fall, we're going to do a running league, and we'll have lots more on that soon, but called Outrider.
Yeah. They're just so population dense over there that it's like
runners all over the place.
Infrastructure for, run leagues, because it's not hard for everybody to meet up in a centralized location.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
So I'll meet Taylor Spike this weekend, which I'm super stoked on. Some fun locals coming out. Billy Yang's going to be there again, like he was for our winter run, and Floris Gearman. They'll be at the finish line, putting medals on people, welcoming people. Path is going to have an incredible station there at the finish line. So I feel like I love being a race director. Also, the thing that makes me nervous about it is that we have been offering a lot of our takes on being a race director. And so I just think, on Aravipa or on UTMB, and I know those are the big players, but how does that filter down to the grassroots, smaller, local, regional events? And what's our responsibility there? So it's had me thinking a lot. When you look at prize money, like, I understand the economics at a 300 person race, nearly impossible. But we have great sponsors. So like Naked, they're providing belts to the winners, and Path is providing really, really sizable gift cards to the winners. But it makes me, I really have to think, am I being a hypocrite when I'm being critical of this or that? We've never had elites, and I hear, okay, so then Aravipa has this issue with elites and with that version of the race, and were the rules clear? And I'm thinking, well, local regional races, we don't even have rules,
right?
More or less, because they're rarely, we don't have the same consequence of it. But at the same time, it just makes me, it heightens my awareness of my hypocrisy, whether I am or I am not.
Right. And since we're going a little bit more free flow here, I think as long as you give $1 to each of those gentlemen, you've outdone Aravaipa at any of their races. So I think you ought to do that. I think it's an ought claim.
Yeah.
I think you ought to give them $1, and we'll celebrate that on Bad Runners Take as being, a bigger prize purse than any of the Aravaipa races to date.
If I hadn't already named the runners and made it public, I would just say off the record, I would say, ask them and be like, hey, because you and I both have had a lot of offline discussions since we've talked about this dream 100 miler where the winners get $100,000, M1 and F1 each get $100,000. And we've been hearing from some pretty notable runners and going back and forth and talking about that sort of stuff. I don't know that they feel like they can speak up, or, that the risk might be too much, but to even from a PR standpoint, that, you give them $1 and you say into the microphone, we have now exceeded what Aravipa does. And forgive me if I'm unaware of Aravipa doing something that's more, but the principle remains. We have now exceeded what Aravipa does. Like, from a PR standpoint, that's a real banger right there. If we were to actually be the ones leading the charge on getting these elite athletes paid, well, what a way to put that commentary. Every local regional race in the country who cares about that, to do that same thing, it get real noisy.
Yeah, not to point the finger at Aravipa. It's to say, we know you're coming out here as a training race build up for Western States. Here's $1 to ensure that you don't go home empty handed at Western States. because Western State's
Yeah,
not going
they're
to pay you anything, right? So, you can pay them in jest of saying, even if you finish in the top 10 at Western States, like, here, at least you remember Salt Lake, they gave you $5.
yes. Yeah, we have now exceeded by one data point, we have exceeded one of Western State's metrics.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't get it. So maybe we'll
Yeah.
someday be able to come on the podcast and celebrate, because we will be the first to celebrate. It's not like we're going to pivot to something else to
Yeah.
complain.
Well, okay, on that, we
Yeah.
should celebrate Mammoth. Mammoth has a $20,000 prize purse for their 200-mile race.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's definitely something to celebrate. I mean, that's being the first at that distance to award prize money. They could have easily just, slid into the wake of, Cocodona and Candace's races, that don't have prize money. Instead, they came out, and it seems like they're making a genuine effort to be a destination for professionals.
Yeah, I think Tim Tollefson would have had the exact same people on the roster if he did or did not put that $20,000 forward. So clearly want to appreciate Tim Tollefson because my case is always, as a fan, I want to see the elites get paid for winning, because it's only going to make the whole fan experience better. That's where money comes in to make live coverage better, and everything comes in to make it better. So shout out to Tim Tollefson for writing the check that he did not have to write, because I think every runner on there was going to run it anyways.
Yeah, and he's partnered with Golden Trail Series, and they pay their runners prize money as well. And I think maybe this is an interesting topic to talk about next time, is that maybe the best race directors, or every race director should have on their board, is a fellow elite. It would be hard for you to be Tim Tollefson, having competed for a decade in the sport without prize money, and then be a race director and decide, I'm not going to give prize money either. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes the best to do it are the best ones to then move into, I think, directing races and making sure rules are cleaned up and tidy and make sense for the professional runner. Prize money's there for the professional runner. Like, they need to have guys like Tim Tollefson on boards and contributing to all of these races, golden ticket races and beyond. Like, there needs to be a difference between the professional field and the amateur field. You think about I was thinking about this, like golf, right? Like, I keep going back to golf. It's crazy. I think it's just because it's individual competitors, not teams, right? And so in golf, most amateurs don't play by the rules, the letter of the rule. Everybody makes their own rule, right? They kind of they bump their ball to get a cleaner lie. They use mulligans, right? Like, there's this amateur game that's completely different. Like, if any amateur was held to the standard and rules of the USGA, their score would be much higher. But it's fine. We celebrate the amateur. But we don't expect the rules of the amateur to blend into the pro. When we watch the PGA Tour, we expect it to be a very tight, buttoned up, adherence to the rules, right? And the PGA has the system where they have a rules official with every group. They don't rely on the golfers exclusively to police themselves and deliver punishments and things like that. And so where we're at in the sport right now is we're kind of playing the amateur game with the professionals, and it just isn't working.
Yeah, that'd be fun to unpack some more.
Yeah.
Okay. Next week, because you said maybe this will be one we do next week. Next week, I arrive back in Paris. So I leave this Thursday for Salt Lake City. Friday, get set up for the race. Saturday, we run the race, clean up that night, take everything to storage. Sunday morning, I'm on a flight back to Paris. I will arrive back in Paris on Monday morning. There is possibly time where I could be back in front of this mic next Monday, and we do this again next Monday. If not, we might have a place filler here or something like that. But our goal is every Monday. So hopefully the two of us will see you next Monday. If not, it'll be the following.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Good to see you.
Take it easy.